Having arrived at a date somewhat close to the summer solstice on the Gregorian calendar, I am now going to tell you an arbitrary number of books in descending order of how much I subjectively liked them more than other books that I've read up until this point. Hello, welcome to The Book Thing. My name is Mark. Apparently, my channel is now old enough to have a tradition. So this is the second time that I will be giving you my mid-year top 10. So this is of all the books that I read up until this point of the year. These are the 10 that I liked the most. At the number 10 spot, surprisingly, is Flint by Louis L'Amour. This is a buddy read that I did a wee while ago with Nicky Lachelle Esteem and is a pulp western. Louis L'Amour is kind of the king of the pulp western, and he wrote about 150 of them between about the 50s and the 70s, possibly the 80s. And the first one that I've read of his is Flint. And Flint is the story of this aging cowboy called Kettleman who has gone east to make his fortune, discovers that he is dying and makes his way back west to die. And he takes on the name of his old cowboy mentor, Flint, and ends up in a town where the usual types of shenanigans are happening in the West, where there's the big businessman trying to take the ranch away from the young heiress, that sort of thing. But I was really quite surprised by how good this was. It had a really nice meditative pace. It had absolutely fantastic characters. And there was some scenes in it, especially towards the back half of the book, just some really nicely played out, tense cat and mouse scenes between a couple of characters and the vast landscape that they were inhabiting. And do you know something? It was a bit of a joy to read. Whether it'll be still in the top 10 by the end of the year, probably not. But at this point, Flint makes a pretty worthy inclusion as number 10. At number 9, for the very first time, a Discworld book is entering my top 10 lists. The reason I haven't included Discworld books in the past is because for the vast majority of them, they have been rereads. But towards the beginning of this year, I finally managed to finish my read-through of the Discworld series, and there was a couple at the end that I hadn't read before. And the one of those that makes the list is Snuff by Terry Pratchett. So Snuff is the final one of the City Watch books, and it's the story of Sam Vimes going to take a break in his estate in the country, and when Sam Vimes goes somewhere, he ends up investigating a crime. This one seems to be involved in the local population of goblins. This was a pretty good effort from Pratchett for his last City Watch book, and a pretty good Pratchett City Watch book is generally better than most other books I would read. It's not going to bother my top 10 of Discworld books, and if this had been a first reading of one of the other City Watch books, chances are it would have made it much higher up the list. I liked Snuff a lot. That being said, I did feel that the last third let it down, and it just didn't have as strong a finish as I would have liked it to. But the parts at the start were describing the pathos around the goblins and the lives that they were leading. It nearly brought a tear to my eyes. So I'm really glad I finally got to read Snuff, and yeah, number 9 seems like a fair place for it. At number 8, we've got All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first one of her Murderbot diaries, and in my opinion, it's probably the best one. It is my favorite. So this is the story of a sentient security droid who manages to hack his systems so that he no longer is required to follow orders anymore, but he kind of does anyway because it's the easy way to hide the fact that he's hacked all his systems, and decides to refer to himself as Murderbot. Murderbot is a pretty aggressive name that he adopts, considering actually all he really wants to do is sit and watch soaps all day, every day. I kind of love these. The first one, in my opinion, is the best. Murderbot as a character is just fantastic. He has this great nihilistic streak where he really just doesn't seem to care about anything. But as you start to go along, you see that actually under all that, he does have a little bit of a heart of gold. I like this series a lot. It's great fun. And the first one is actually really quite short. It's more of a novella than anything else. And I think the series is at its best when it's that short. At number 7, we have got Acceptance by Jeff VanderMeer, the third and what was until recently the final part of the Southern Reach series. So I don't want to spoil this, and considering this is the third part, there are major spoilers for the first and second book. So I'll be as vague as I can, which is quite easy to be because the entire series is really quite vague, which is quite why I like it so much. He has created this area known as Area X, which just seems to be cut off from the rest of the world, an area of weirdness and weird dread, and it isn't quite described what's so different about it. VanderMeer does this fantastic job of both making it really descriptive so that you're very immersed in the story, but also extremely ambiguous so you're not really certain where this sense of dread is coming from. The story on this, there's 3 story threads. One is set many years before it becomes Area X. The second is set in what is our present in the timeline, and it concerns 2 characters from the second book. And then the third one is set just before the events of the first book and concerns one of the women who was on that first mission that we saw. I know a lot of people think that the other 2 books in the series are just not a patch on Annihilation, and that's probably true, but I have to say, even though I wasn't a massive fan of Authority, Acceptance did a really good job of rounding out the trilogy. I'm really curious to see what Absolution is going to be like. At number 6, we've got the Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This was a challenging read, as you would expect. This is a piece of 19th century Russian literature, and this is Dostoevsky at putting his everything into this. On the surface is the story of 3 brothers and the eventual murder of their father, but Dostoevsky puts into this all his thoughts and observations on Russia of the time from a political perspective, the influence that the rest of Europe is having on it, from a religious perspective, from a moral perspective. He throws everything in there. There's one section in there where he does this entire parable about how inconvenient Jesus is to the established church at the time. And he tells this story with this tale of the second coming of Jesus arriving at a time during the Spanish Inquisition. There's a lot to unpack in there, but it is genuinely immersive, and the characters are absolutely phenomenal, and the story is genuinely something that will keep you gripped for all its several hundreds of pages. At number 5, we've got A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This was a book that I read because my youngest was reading it in school, and I do try and read the books that my kids are reading. So this is the story of Connor O'Malley, whose mother is ill with cancer, and one night he is woken by a monster, and this monster tells him he's going to return and tell him stories, and this is all about the stories that the monster tells and how Connor is dealing with the illness of his mother. This is a phenomenal story about grief and loss and acceptance, and was quite the surprise for me when I picked it up. I'm really glad my youngest was reading that this year. In the number 4 spot, we've got The Talented Mr Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. This was a massive surprise for me. I'd seen the film of The Talented Mr Ripley many years ago, the one with Matt Damon and Jude Law, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was great. But I'd been told that the book was better, and I picked this up and was absolutely gripped. It is told from the perspective of Tom Ripley, who has been hired by the father of an acquaintance of his called Dickie Greenleaf to go to Italy and convince Dickie to come home to the US. Tom goes over there and inserts himself into Dickie's life, and Tom is a petty con man, and things start to go downhill. This is a great example of tension being built, and I'm not even saying rooting for the villain, but certainly you're feeling the tension of the hands of justice constantly reaching for Tom and his efforts to evade them. He isn't a suave, sophisticated con man. He just seems to be someone who is flying by the seat of his pants. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. At number 3, we have Germinal by Emile Zola. So this is a story about miners in France in the 19th century and the arrival of a character called Esteem, who starts to work in the mines and the horrific conditions that are there, and as a result ends up being part and a leader of the industrial action that takes place and the workers' strike that happens. This is pretty harrowing to read. It is something that if you're a fan of like the Dust Bowl books of John Steinbeck, I'd really recommend reading Zola. It's not an easy read, but it's a pretty damn good one. At number 2, we've got Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This was a buddy read that I did with my friend John at Disquiet and Dragons, and it's the story of the astronaut Ryland Grace, who wakes up on a ship without any recollection of who he is or what he is doing there, and him trying to piece together the details of this mission that he's on, Project Hail Mary. And it is literally a Hail Mary mission. It's an existential crisis for life on Earth, and he is out in space trying to find a solution and trying to remember what the problem was in the first place. This is such a joyful book. This was so much fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's one of these books that I just recommend to absolutely everyone. I haven't gotten quite to the point of stopping strangers in the streets and telling them they should read Project Hail Mary, but I'm not far off. And at the number 1 spot is James by Percival Everett. This is the retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn as seen through the eyes of Jim, the man who is running away from slavery and accompanies Huck. It takes the story in very different directions, improves it in many ways, in my opinion, and is fairly instrumental in why Percival Everett won the Pulitzer Prize this year. I absolutely love this book. It doesn't necessarily require you to have read Huckleberry Finn beforehand. It helps a bit, but I wasn't a fan of Huckleberry Finn, but I absolutely love James. So that's it. That's my top 10 of the year so far. I've read some good stuff since, so some of these books are very much in danger of sliding down the list, but I'd love to know what you think and what your favourite book of the year so far is. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that, and take care.